Welcome, everyone. It's episode 66 for all of those bingo fans, clickety-click. And I am joined by, I'm sure, a fair number of bingo fans, Phil,
Yep.
Gary and Marianna. Marianna, I'll let you off. You're the youngie of the group. You probably play the lottery more than bingo. But the lottery today, of course, was trying to get tickets for any of the NFL games taking place outside of America, which seems to be you're more likely to open up a golden ticket in a Wonka bar these days than you are to get into an NFL game. But we don't care about those other teams. We care about the Bucs. And this week we are looking at the roster. So we're going to canter through the roster, who's in, who's out, who we think ought to be starting. Already seen the far too early in the season depth charts being published, and we can pour over those as well. But let's start where it all begins with Phil's insurance policy up at QB. You're not retiring just yet. He's still playing one more year. So QB is presumably straightforward, Phil. But how do you think it shakes up behind Tom?
Well, with Brady, I get a feeling that Kyle Trask could well be the backup, because I just think that they've kept him in the background, all quiet, and he's been learning from the greatest player of all time. And I'd like to see Kyle Trask have a go, because he was very, very good in college, very raw, and I think that's what the Buccaneers liked about him. And you know, the great saying we've got, "In Jason we trust." So I think Kyle Trask.
Gary, I mean, if the game's on the line, are you going to put Gabbert out there, or Trask, or even Griffin? They're all on the roster still.
Well, if the game's on the line, you're going to put Gabbert. But I mean, to me, who gets the number 2 QB is probably one of the more interesting battles of training camp. But I'll tell you now who's going to win that job, and it will be whoever Tom Brady wants as his backup.
That's good. Marianna, if you were a betting person, where would your money sit?
As a betting person, I think Gabbert gets the job. I think he's backed Brady up for the past couple of years. He's going to back him up. I think Brady trusts him. I think Trask is going to get, he's going to certainly get more preseason time, I think, but I don't think he gets that backup job. I think that goes to Gabbert.
And Trask obviously is way too over the radar now to be snuck away on the practice roster or any of that lot. So, I mean, we can't carry 4 QBs, can we?
No. I don't think we do. I think we carry the. I think he sits on the practice squad for another year. I really do.
Yeah, barring any injuries, you're going to have exactly the same situation as last year with. Trask will get a redshirt year again, and Griffin they'll keep on the practice squad for to be a camp arm, really.
Okay, so that's the lockdown bit that's already been in the bag, and we've already spent 5 minutes talking about who's playing quarterback. So we can't agree on anything clearly. But the next controversy on offense is probably the O-line. So some in, some out, some up, some down. Gary, if we come to you, I mean. It feels like we've got a fairly consensual group, but it maybe doesn't come down to exactly 5, does it?
No, but then realistically, the only spot that's up for grabs is going to be left guard, isn't it? To replace Ali Marpet. So I got a sneaking feeling Stinney will win that job to start the season at least. He's got experience. But then they drafted Gadecki in the 2nd round. And don't sleep on Hainsey, who was a 3rd-round pick last year. So that's going to be a really interesting battle. The other spots are all sorted. Mason was a brilliant pickup for the right guard, and the other 3 positions, well, they're as good as anybody in the league.
Marianna, I think we all agree it's Stinney, Gadecki, I can't say it properly, and Hainsey.
Yeah. Full on. I think my O-line, I was kind of drawing it out, and I think we're in pretty much agreement that like 4 of the 5 are set out, and I was kind of writing out what I thought it would look like. And we've got obviously Smith, Jensen, Shaq, Mason, and Wirfs, and those 4 are set, I think. So it is really that left guard spot. I think Hainsey has played across the line, and I think he continues to do so. I think they'll still use him in that rotating sort of role. So should Mason need to come out, Mason's kind of, I guess, on the older side of the O-line, so he might need to come out for a couple of snaps here and there. They can rotate Hainsey in there. Jensen might need to come out. Hainsey's played at centre. He can pop in there. You know, so I think Hainsey will be that sort of guy to play across the line. I think, as you say, that left guard role is between Stinney and Gadecki. I kind of disagree slightly with Gary, and I think it goes to Gadecki. But it will depend on, obviously, training camp and how he sort of pans out there. And I think Stinney is the sort of more backup guy to him. But I think Hainsey will play that key role of going across the line and taking all three of those spots potentially in rotation. So
I think the only name we maybe haven't mentioned that possibly deserves mentioning is Josh Wells. But maybe, is it fair to say we maybe weren't impressed last year?
Yeah, I think I was listening to what Marianna and Gary said. I'm a bit in between the two, to be quite honest. I think Gadecki will actually start, but not straight away. Josh Wells, another backup. But again, my worries is always the offensive line. It always frightens me to death. Last year we lost Wirfs for the Rams game and didn't show. And I just we've got to replace, you know, Marpet and Kappa. We've got to replace two very, very good players. I mean, they weren't just ordinary players; these were two very good players. Mason, like Gary says, is a good one. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting camp, interesting preseason.
I think actually you make a really good point there, Phil, because we've got probably depth across the sort of inside positions, but on the tackles, I wouldn't say we're necessarily like there's someone that I would like swap in for Smith or Wirfs straight away. I suppose Gadecki, he was listed as tackle, so I would assume that they would maybe switch him in, but I think tackle, if we lose one of our tackles, we're in a lot worse position than if we lose guard or centre.
Yeah. I just a little point. I love what somebody described Gadecki as when I was looking through some notes. He says it's Jensen with attitude. I thought, oh dear.
We might have some flags flying. The days we haven't seen since Jeremy Trueblood or someone.
Yeah, be interesting. It's going to be interesting, offensive line.
So I guess go on, carry on, Phil.
I was just going to say as well, there's something else on the offensive line I'd like to mention as well. We've lost Grant, we've lost Howard, both good offensive line sort of backups. That's going to be an interesting situation as well. You know, we've signed Rudolph and
the red-nosed tight end.
Red-nosed tight end, and both block the new guy, rookie tight end, was it Kate Oaten? He's quite a blocking tight end, but we're gonna miss those two because those two did a good job on blocking on the offensive line, you know.
Well, let's come on to talk about tight ends then, because I'm looking on my other screen at the ESPN far too early in the season depth chart. I know some people call it BSPN, but that's a discussion for another day. They've got Cam Brate listed as tight end number 1. And they've got Rudolph second, Oaten third, and then O'Keefe sort of way down the bottom. And who knows if we even carry 4 tight ends. Gary, is that about right, do you think?
Well, I think it depends on the situation in the game, really. I think if we're in the red zone, then they're going to stick Brate in, aren't they? If we're on our own 20-yard line, then we need yards. They'll put Rudolph in.
So Rudolph's better at stretching the field, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I was a bit worried about the tight end position, I'll be honest, because before we signed Rudolph, Brate was about it, really. But they've done just about as good a job as they can do getting Rudolph in. So, you're never going to replace Gronk, but they've done as well as they can.
Do you think Rudolph, I mean, how would you rate him? I don't, using whatever scale you want, is he actually a steal or is it, papering over the cracks?
Well, like I say, you're never going to replace Gronk. So to a certain extent, you are papering over the cracks. But don't forget, a couple of years ago, he was a heck of a good player. He was playing for some crappy team in New York last year. So He's still got a couple of 100 yards, I think only one touchdown, but he's only a couple of years away from really, really good seasons.
And
So
actually, that's a good point, Marianna, because you've probably seen him more than most of us. You're right, and then going back even pre Giants, yeah, he was quite high up on the fantasy football rankings, and he was one of the more active receiving tight ends, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he got underused at the Giants, but that's more to do with the Giants organization than I think Kyle Rudolph. So I think him coming to the Bucs, I think he's in a perfect situation for a receiving tight end. And personally, I think, I'd still put Cam Brate number one because Brate's been with the team longer, knows the setup better. But yeah, I think Kyle Rudolph will be back to probably his sort of best level coming into the Bucs.
Do you think we might be a little bit more, shall I say, vanilla in formation terms because maybe using less two tight end stuff?
No, I think I do think that Cade Otton coming in as the rookie may take some of those sort of some of those snaps as well in sort of the two tight end set. So I kind of see it being like either Cam or Rudolph being in that number one spot. And depending on what we're doing, I feel like Otton's going to be in there. But I think Keith, if he comes in, he would be more of a blocking guy. He's the bigger sort of more like an O lineman than a tight end. If we do carry the four.
Well, speaking of bigger guys, more like an O lineman than a tight end, let's come on to talk about running backs then. Everyone's favourite snacker, Leonard Fournette. I mean, talk about body shaming. I think that Lenny's going to be good to go, isn't he, Marianna?
Yeah, my man Lenny will be good to go. let's just clear that up. My man Lenny will be good to go. He might have had a couple of donuts too many. He is going to be good to go on the day. I think this thing of him being like 228 or something listed like 228 on the roster is probably a bit under what it is. The guy's, the size he is, he's a bigger back. He's a stronger back. He needs a bit of weight behind him. And I think we've all said, I'd rather tackle him at a lower weight than a heavier weight. The only worry you've got is maybe injuries, but I think, in some ways that kind of also protects him a little bit. So I think, if he gets down to the weight that they expect him, which is somewhere between 230 and 240, he'll be fine.
And Gary, I mean, we know the Bucs like to run it up the gut on 1st and 10. So he's going to be the one running up the gut. And I think he probably is the right back for that, isn't he?
Well, I would say so. You've got the battle for the second spot between the new guy White and Vaughan, but Fournette has got it nailed down. I'm not in the least bit bothered about his weight. I mean, he'll sweat off any excess in the first couple of days of training camp. I heard a stat the other day about Fournette, and this is the reason they'll use him. He has never lost a fumble in a game.
Everyone find something wooden. Well, that's a good stat, and long may that continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, how big is the loss of Rojo, Phil? What does that mean to our camp of backs?
You see, I'm listening to what everybody's saying here, and I'm quite concerned at running back, to be quite honest. I was a bit concerned last season as well. And I think the loss of Rojo is going to be bigger than people think because, Fournette he always has an injury, doesn't he? Every season, Fournette gets injured. And so we're going to have to bring somebody that's reliable. And who we got? Vaughan or White? White, they were saying it, in all the draft analysis that White could be a bit of a reach and Vaughan's going to step up. So it concerns me a bit at running back, to be quite honest.
And I presume we're all saying we're all taking it as read then that Bernard's the third down receiving back and he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. The thing about Vaughan is he came on strong towards the back end of last season. And, he's 2 years in now, so this is his third year, another training camp. I'm not bothered about him at all. I think he may well win the second running back spot.
And of course, those White and Vaughan, if they can play some good special teams, that's how they'll stay on the roster, I think, as well. But speaking of staying on the roster, I think the most packed part of the roster for the second year in a row is the receiving core, as we say over here, corpse. And okay, Mike Evans, yes. Godwin wants the cast off kind of thing, and he's off the crutches. But who else then? Is it Marianna?
Well, I mean, obviously Russell Gage, I think is your sort of number 3. He's got that strong coming in. So you've got Evans, Godwin, Gage. I think you sort of, once you're getting down into the sort of deeper levels, that is where you're looking. Rashad Perriman didn't do much for me really last year. I could see him not lasting past training camp.
He's been broken by a New York team as well, hasn't he?
Darden and Grayson, I think they're on the edge as well. So it'll be quite interesting. I was looking at who we've got. I'm saving one for a bit later. But the 2 I was looking at were 2 of our undrafted free agents, and that's Tompkins and Stearns. Both of those 2 look really interesting and could definitely pick up a spot, particularly off of Darden or off of Grayson, who, as I say, very much on the line. Johnson as well. He dropped a few as well last year, didn't he? So does he make it, or do they potentially pick up a spot off of him?
Yeah, I feel like there's a special teams conversation looming, but we'll come back to that. But Gary, I think Marianna's made some interesting points about Tyler Johnson, Brashad Perriman, Jalen Darden, even Scotty Miller. Last year was not a good year to be a backup wide receiver for the Bucs in terms of performance, was it?
No, it wasn't. And Miller was injured, of course. I mean, I looked down through the roster and started to write down names of all the wide receivers we've got on the roster, and my pen ran out of ink. We've got so many. The first 3 are set: Evans, Godwin, and Gage. And then I wrote down wide receiver 4, 5, 6 ? How many are they going to keep? And you've got, Grayson, Miller, Perriman, Tyler Johnson, Darden, Tompkins, and Stearns. That guy Stearns had one heck of a year in the powerhouse that is Western Kentucky last year. He got 17 touchdowns, 1,900 yards. Tompkins has been mentioned by Todd Bowles at one of the press conferences as a guy to watch. So that's going to be a really interesting fight for, those roster spots. And if you're not fighting for a roster spot, as you've alluded to, the special teams is going to come into it, but the practice squad for, of course, anybody can go on the practice squad now. So we could find 4 or 5 receivers on the practice squad.
Of course, the risk of going on the practice squad is technically you are cut and then re-signed to the practice squad. You can't just sneak people over there anymore. Phil, we haven't mentioned Cyril Grayson yet. I think, was he the bright spot amongst the backups last year, or do you think he's got it going?
Well, I think he was forced into prominence due to injuries, as we all know. And when he performed, we were all sort of, whoa, yeah, we found somebody here that could pull us through. And he was our big hope going into the playoffs because we were so banged up with injuries, and of course we lost Antonio on throwing Mark toys out of the Pram Brown as well. So I think it's the backups, like Gary said, you could just pencil anybody in. And I think there'll be some big surprises up there. Scotty Miller didn't have a good year last year because he was injured. And Tyler Johnson, I don't know. 1 minute he's making the best catch you've ever seen in your life. The next minute he's dropping one that's right into his hands. To me, the wide receiver is the most interesting thing behind those 3 of Evans, Godwin, and Gage.
Interesting. So we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. You guys do let us have your views as well. Post on the comments down below whilst you're subscribing and hammering the bell. Do all of those things, and in the meantime, we will move on to the defensive side of the ball. So again, another sort of position where we've had people coming and going is that, let's call it the front 7, although it seems to fluctuate. Sue seems to be gone in the sense that he's not on the roster, but he hasn't gone anywhere else, has he, Gary? So does that tell you something?
Well, I keep thinking that. You know, he apparently still lives in the Tampa area. He wants to play. He's probably asking for too much money, and that tickles me to death, really, because he's earned what, $200 million in his career. You know, why, if you want to play one more year, why wouldn't you just say, Jason, you know, give me a couple of million, I'll do a job for you.
He is the master of the 1 year contract.
Yeah, it worries me that he's not on the roster, because he's, you know, he stuffs the run brilliantly. You know, him and Villa in the middle there, no one's going to get past them. And JPP similarly as well. I know he was hurt last year. You know,
AWOL from the roster, yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to see both of them back on the roster if they're fully fit.
I mean, it kind of feels like we've swung from one extreme to the other, doesn't it, Marianna? So after the Super Bowl, all 22 starters are back. It seems like maybe that wasn't the right call. I think Gary, dare I say it, slightly pewter-tinted spectacles. They weren't good players last year. I don't think, if we didn't know who Sue and JPP were, I'm not sure we'd have said they're any better than, you know, JTS or, you know, Nacho.
I think I'm in agreement with you there. I think JPP, shoulder injury, struggled. I think, you know, Sue, probably not so much with Sue. I think he was a good player, but, you know, he is coming to that sort of swan song of his career. And we've picked up Akeem Hicks. Don't forget that we picked up him in the sort of free agency. So he kind of fills a hole there. Hopefully Shoyinka steps up. Tryon Shoyinka steps up this year, comes on good. And we've got our new rookie that we picked up top of the second round in Logan Hall. So I'm not horrendously worried, strangely, which I feel like maybe I should be, but and I still think we've got a lot of good players, like good rotational players. We've got the sort of Nunez Roches who stepped up when there were injuries, you know, 2 seasons ago. So we've got other players that can step in.
Phil, talking about Logan Hall then, again, the depth chart I'm looking at, he's third over on the left behind Hicks and Nunez Roches. I think that would speak to what Marianna says about depth up front. Do you agree?
I think he says about early season depth charts, to be quite honest. I mean, I've listened to what you're going to say. I personally think that yet again, it's going to be one of those very interesting seasons. There's more teams than enough have held on to older players because they've got good names. And I think Pierre Paul's one of them. I think he's, you know, I hope he's not listening to this, but past his sell-by date, you know. And Dominican Sue, you've always got to keep an eye on him. But again, he's at the end of his career. The one player that I want, that I think is going to shine actually is Tryon. I can't say his proper name, but
I just call him JTS.
Yeah, JTS will do, because I think towards the end of the season he was starting to show something. He was starting to show a bit of sign. And don't forget, when we picked him up as a rookie, he hadn't played for 12 months. So you know he was, I think he was injured. Then he was a COVID opt-out, and also Logan Hall is from what I read in all the reports when we drafted him, he's one hell of a player. So I just think we've got to move on without Sue and move on without.
Well,
JPP.
moving on. So you've got So JTS is obviously one of the weak side, strong side linebacker, the outside linebackers, who are meant to be bringing the pressure. And over on the other side, you've got Shaq Barrett. So there's another question mark there. And in the middle, Levante David, timeless. I'll defend anyone to the death if they try and have a go at him. Devin White. Question mark, Gary?
Yeah, contract year. He'll be brilliant this year. Don't worry about him. Don't worry about him.
We really noticed his play when Levante wasn't on the field, didn't we?
Yeah, and everybody made a big thing of it. But, you know, that probably says more about how good Levante is than how bad Devin White is. You know, who was backing up Levante David? You know, who? Kevin who? He's so good they haven't kept him on this year. So, I mean, that inside linebacker position is a concern, because if David or White go down, you know, who do you plug in there? KJ Britt and Grant Stewart. Well, you're not going to win a Super Bowl with them two playing that position.
And then you start to get into tactical dilemmas about, do you go to the nickel or something? And that takes us on to the secondary, where we know, again, it was thin pickings, wasn't it, Marianna, for much of the last 2 years?
Yeah, we suffered with the injuries last season, definitely. I think if they stay healthy this year, we're in good shape, but it's just if those injuries start kicking in again. I mean, we did pick up Logan Ryan at safety, but he's older, so you know how much. I think he's more of an experienced player than necessarily a, you know, you've got probably injury worries there as well. I was actually looking again at some of the younger players that we brought in there. And I was looking at safety we brought in the brother of Fred Warner, Troy Warner from BYU, as I think again as an undrafted free agent. And his brother likes him, so I mean, he was one of the top guys in the defense like last year. So maybe we've got a steal there. But I think we've got to look towards players like, you know, the Cockerells, you know, the Delaney's, those sort of players. We need to be making sure that those depth players are ready to go, because we just suffered injuries so badly last season in that secondary. That's where I want the depth, definitely.
I think that's a really good point. And so, Gary, I mean, what Marianna's really saying is, on the one hand, for so many years, the secondary's just been ripped apart through injuries. But the flip side, certainly from commentators hearing it on the game, was, well, these were young guys. They're getting exposure. They're going to get up to speed. But there's no like obvious ascendancy, is there? Jamil Dean, yeah, he's locked down the starting place. Anton Winfield, yep, he's definitely on. Carlton Davis probably, but after that, it all seems to blur together, doesn't it?
Well, it does in terms of the depth. Yeah, there's a lot of names. Marianna mentioned Cockrell and Delaney, and you've got several others there as well. Scott Smith, I love Scott Smith to death, and he always says, doesn't he, you can't have enough cornerbacks. And it's true, and we proved that last year. You know, not one snap last year with the secondary that they wanted, not one throughout the whole of the season. So we need that depth, and there is a lot of depth. And Kieron O'Neill as well, don't forget him. Logan Ryan, he might be getting up there in age for a football player, but he can still play. And of course, you've got the best safety in the league in Antoine Winfield.
I'm hoping Winfield's got a chip on his shoulder from the last play of last season. I really want him to come back with a vengeance. Phil, we haven't mentioned Sean Murphy-Bunting yet.
No,
there's no reason for that.
I think what Marianna was saying about the injuries is true, but I don't think that can be underplayed at all. I mean, it was a question last week was, have you bought your boots? Can you play safety? You'll do. And we just lost. It was week after week after week. I mean, it was just I've never seen a position in any team where we were just like, oh, he's out. So I think once they get them all fit, I'm not too concerned about this. I think Ryan will still contribute, and Neil was. I'm not too concerned about it. I think we could be okay there this year. We could be okay. But again, as I said at the start, we have to have a lot of luck to carry it through. We've got to, have less. If we get less injuries, then I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, the one thing about the injuries last year, I mean, they might have been fit, apparently, to play, but how fit were they when they came back? I mean, anybody that's played any contact sport plays with injuries. You get a bang on the leg, you're not going to be able to run as quick. You're not going to be able to jump as high. So they might have been, fit in name, but were they, match fit, match conditioned? I somehow doubt. And as long as we can avoid those injuries this year, I'm not bothered about the secondary, as long as they avoid the injury.
I think that's a really good point. And certainly towards the playoffs, there felt like there were lots of players falling down in coverage. I never know whether that's just the field or the players, but I think the cumulative effect of the season did start to wear. One player I'm interested in was one of the guys that we drafted. As Boney M says, you have to remember Zion, and I think Zion McCollum is going to be someone I'm particularly interested in following. I think he could be someone a bit like a sort of JTS that's probably going to see the game running a little bit quick at the beginning of the season, but by the end of the season might come to the fore. I think we might see. I'm hoping we see the secondary with picking the ball off a lot more. I think they did they had their fair share. It's not a gripe, but if we can get the pressure up front, I think they could do some good things. So let's move on to everyone's favourite third of the game, special teams. And we'll talk about the kickers a bit later, Marianna, because I think you want to talk about returners first, don't you?
I'm full on returners. I've been looking at this, and I think, I mean, obviously we've had like a few experiments. They've got a player that they've pulled in from the Jets. It was actually interestingly, with a little reflection on the Munich game coming up. He's a US Army, born in Germany lad. Vincent Smith played with the Jets for a few games. Hasn't played a massive amount of games. I think he had some injury as well. I was watching his highlights as I was kind of going through, as we say, this endless list of wide receivers, and he did some returning for the Jets, and he pulled off like some really good returns. I mean, his average was he only did 10 kick returns, but his average was basically just short of 30 yards on those. So he's got some talent at returning. I mean, if we got 30 yards consistently, I think we'd be quite happy. Anything more is great, but if you look at his highlight reels as well, he's got like about an 80-yard return against the Dolphins and something like a 45 against the Ravens. So he's got some like really sort of flashy highlights just within those 10 kick returns. So I wonder if he's not there to kind of compete for that returning job. So that's my little pickup from like when I was going through the roster, this Vincent Smith, whether he might be the one to compete for that return job on the roster there.
I'll be honest, I hadn't really done much digging into him, other than noticing that he's from the Jonathan Banks of first name spellings. So 4 years, 3 years at the Jets, 1 year at Houston, 23 catches in 4 years, and then 1 TD. So, mate, you're right, he's definitely a situational player, but they must see something in him to have pulled him in. And I think, again, not being a rookie, maybe that gives him a slight edge.
Yeah. I as I say, I highly recommend like go and have a look at his highlight reel, which is quite a quick watch, as you can imagine. But he definitely those couple of like flashy kickoff returns. And as I say, when you've only done 10 kickoff returns, but your average is sort of 30 yards, I'd be quite happy, because I don't feel like our average is 30 yards at the moment at the best of times.
Average is a fair catch. I mean, Gary, I know I moan about it. Help me out here. I'm not the only one. It's got to get better, isn't it?
Well, certainly in terms of the return game, it can't get any worse, can it? I mean, this guy from the Jets sounds quite good. I mean, my hobby horse, I sound like a broken record on it, is why on earth have they just run straight up the field? I don't know anything about this guy from the Jets other than what Marianna has just said. Marianna, the touchdown or the big long returns he got, did he break them wide out to the sideline, or did he run straight up the middle?
Actually, that 80-yard one, he kind of started from the left sort of touchline and actually went across the field and broke some tackles. So he was kind of going more towards the middle, but he went cross field and ended up on the right-hand side of the field. So he went from left to right and just broke the field. I think with the Ravens one, that's more of him going kind of down the edges. That was, as I say, that was a 40-odd yard return as well. And both of those are more or less from the goal line. So I that's the only reason that I can see that they've brought him in. I couldn't see much else in terms of reasoning to bring a guy in, as you say, with relatively little experience and not a huge amount of upside. But then I saw those two returns and thought, that's where we struggle so much. That's got to be what they pulled him in for.
Well,
So
I mean,
Phil,
from what you're saying, he's got to be a better bet than Darden. Certainly, the 2021 version of Darden, or whatever year it was last year.
I'm just waiting for the headlines. Done.
Yeah, I agree.
It's got to go. Doesn't add anything. I noticed again from this crazy depth chart, they've got Scotty Miller down as the second returner. Maybe that's a play that he could get on the roster. Phil, you're either playing head, shoulders, knees, and toes, or your headphones not working. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm okay now. We just take this off air, but we're having some repairs done here at by BT, and anything's possible today. You know, they're still working on it now. I don't know what they're doing, but you know, we've been in and out all day. It's funny about the about what Gary just said. I wrote down a bit of paper about Gary says something about going straight up the middle again. You know, I agree with you, Darden. I agree with you totally. I just don't think he offered anything last year, and that is the one area of my concern. We didn't do anything at all.
But just bear in mind, he's a year in now. It's like we said about Keyshawn Vaughan. You know, he's a year into his career. He's going to have another training camp. By all accounts, he had a good OTAs, you know, whatever they call them, underwear football, as Joe Buxton likes to call it. You know, he was pretty good. So, I mean, he can't be any worse. But the point is, he's going to need to be an awful lot better if this team is going to be successful on special teams, and if he's going to take us forward in that department. And
then in terms of the people that we actually let touch the ball, obviously we've got Suckup seems to be a shoe-in, potentially, or have we got Borogalis? Is it real competition? What do you think, Marianna?
I think kicker is always competition. I think that's probably the least safe position in football. You make a miss at the bad time, lose a game, the fans and the coaches don't seem to forgive. So I think Borogalis is sitting there waiting his turn. I think Suckup still goes in number one, just based on the last few seasons. But you know, you're never safe as a kicker. I think that's been clear from what we've seen. You know, you just, as soon as you make that mistake, you may not get a second chance to make that up.
And I'm looking at Over the Cap, who say we have 10.5 million in cap space, of which Suckup's salary this year is about 4 million. I don't know how much of that is dead or whatever, but that could come to play, couldn't it?
Every chance, yeah, every chance. Depends on whether they need money for any other position. I mean, Suckup, I accept completely what Marianna says. The thing about Suckup is, though, for us, he's been Mr. Reliable. And we've had rookie kickers. We've had two in the last couple of years, and one couldn't have kicked his way out of a paper bag, and the other one decided he was a good kicker, but he only decided that when he went to the Rams.
Yeah, so, Matt Gay, it was kind of him to nail that field goal at the end of the year, wasn't it?
Wasn't it just? Yeah, wasn't it just? I can see a similar situation to last year with the kickers. Suckup will win the job, I suspect, and they'll keep the other guy on the practice squad, as Marianna said, just in case it goes wrong, Suckup goes wrong, and they've got somebody who's pretty decent to bring in.
Okay, so I mentioned the salary cap. If we've got 10.5 million to splash, it's not a lot of money. If you could go and splurge it on the Black Friday sales, which aisle are you going down, Phil?
That is a very, very interesting question. I think it'd have to be on the defense, to be quite honest. But who you'd actually get there doesn't seem to be a lot out there that particularly takes my eye. I still like to see somebody on the defensive line, and the linebackers as well. just not quite. I think we've got good first choices, but after that, bit iffy about that. To be quite honest.
Would you spend that money on Sue?
No.
Gary?
If it was a choice between Sue and JPP, no, I wouldn't. I'd go for JPP all day long, assuming he's fit. But then there's another old boy of ours, Carl Nassib. He's out there. He wouldn't be expensive at all. So, I mean, the aisle I would go down is the edge rusher aisle. If there's anybody semi-decent out there, then get him in.
A bit like we took a punt on Shaq Barrett a few years ago, and actually that came good, didn't it? And came good. I don't know about you, but I never expected him to have the tenure he's had at the Bucs. I thought, what a great slot for a 1-year fill-in, and actually he did well and came back for a second year and has kept on performing, and hopefully that continues. Marianna, where are you spending your money?
I think I'm walking with Phil and Gary down that defensive aisle. I think that's probably where I feel like if you were going to splash the cash, that's where you go. Personally, I actually would potentially spend it on Sue if he was willing to come back. I think the experience there. I think JPP was probably more injured, whereas Sue, I think, was, Sue seemed to. He does the 1 year and he does the 1 year, but JPP had the sort of shoulder injury and just didn't seem effective on the outside. There's just no one. I think, like Phil, I think I've looked at what's available, who's out there, both in the interior and on the edge, and there just doesn't seem to be a lot out there. So I just don't think there's anyone to pick up unless we trade for something. And I don't really want to see some sort of trade where we're giving away future draft picks at the moment. I don't know that we get better value for it at the moment.
Well, again, according to Over the Cap, we're already paying Sue this year to the tune of $6.8 million in dead cap money, apparently. So some of this is all of this burying stuff off into the future. Marpet's claiming $7 million this year. Sue's getting 6.8, and Gronk's getting $5 million. And AB even managed to chip in with $318,889.
Is that him paying us, or are we paying him?
Yeah, it's probably reimbursing for the damage to the shoulder pads, maybe, or I don't quite know. But yes, that's a really interesting point. So then, overall, I guess is this squad better than last year? Is it better than the Super Bowl winning squad? Is it gonna win the Super Bowl? Has it got a chance? How does it compare, Phil? Do you think?
Is it better than the Super Bowl squad? No, I don't think so. But I think it's better than last year's. To be quite honest. Everybody keeps. I was listening to what I was saying about JPP and Sue, and I honestly think that it's time to move on from those two. I really do. But if we again, I think as I was saying about last year and all this, if we had just kept some of the players fit, we would have been in the Super Bowl. If Wirfs had done that last game, if we'd have had a receiver fit, we would have been in that game. And I honestly think that we were so close. You forget that we were so close, and I honestly believe that we've got a squad that will take us all the way this year, all the way via
Munich. Marianna, do you agree with Phil?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to judge, like comparing where we've got rookies in positions where we had kind of older, more experienced players, but a rookie with a great season might outplay a veteran on the sort of end of his career. So it's hard to say, is that squad a better squad than the Super Bowl squad? I probably doubt it, but I think, like Phil, I probably agree that it's better than last year's. I think we did sort of fill gaps and stuff. Maybe I'm having a little bit of buyer's regret on going down that defensive aisle, and maybe I'm reminded that tackle we could get ourselves someone that could play in the tackle position if we do get an injury across there, because I don't think we've got a really good backup there. So maybe that's where we could spend some of our dead cap space.
I mean, 10 million will get you a
flashy.
starter. 10 million will get you anyone probably apart from a left tackle, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not flashy money, but it's probably a more important position to have a good backup. We're not going to get a left tackle to like a high level, but if you can get someone that's solid enough, because that's where I think, as I say, we potentially struggle with injuries there. But yeah,
out of interest, Donovan Smith will be the best played Buck this year at 18.4 million. So that's been pushed back and pushed back. So Gary, Madden says this is the top rated squad, says Madden. It was a 92 overall. What do you think?
I think time will tell that we this year are a better squad than last year. I like the additions they've made, in the secondary, particularly with Neil and Brian. So in terms of the 10 million cap space, don't forget you need to keep a little bit of money in your back pocket just in case there are injuries and you have to bring people in. But overall, I think this squad is certainly comparable with last year. As I say, I love the additions they've made. One name that we haven't mentioned at all, talking about the defensive side of the ball, someone I'm really keen to see, and that's the 7th round draft pick, Andre Anthony, who had a nasty injury, but he played at LSU, 3 games, 3.5 sacks in his final year. So, could he be the saviour we need out on the edge?
He reminds me a bit of sort of, is it Daquan Bowers? I can't remember his name, in that sort of really high ceiling, but kind of a roll of the dice.
Absolutely. And coming off a bad injury, even more roll of the dice. Time will tell, but that's why I'm really interested to see how he goes.
I think something else you've got to think about as well, which made me laugh. Gronk's gone, or has he? His girlfriend is a bit, she's not so sure. It seems like there's been a lot of mind games this year with Brady and Gronk and Julian Edelman and all the expatriate players sort of playing mind games on social media all the time. But we'll see.
Well, we've got 10 million in cap space if he wants to come back.
And if you're watching this, Gronk, do feel, if you want any of that 10 million, please speak to Jason.
Absolutely, I'm still hoping. I'm still keeping the hope there. That's my little hint to him.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Do let us know your opinions as well. Make sure you get on the forum as well. Excuse me. We've already started selling tickets for our 3 watch parties this year. You can come and watch the Bucs with us in Leeds, in London, or indeed in Birmingham, new for 2022. And it's a late game, so I've heard promises of a lock-in. If you don't know what that is, if you're an American, they just keep serving. So that's exactly what we're planning on celebrating. We will be over in Munich. So if you're around then, make sure to reach out to us. We'd love to get together with as many of you as possible. And Gary, it's going to be competition time soon, isn't it? The fantasy football is going to be back, all the prediction competitions, the weekly competitions. So if you haven't renewed your membership, there are prizes in Phil's chest, not the one on the screen, the one maybe behind him. But he's desperate to offload them. He wants people to win, and there's going to be some real goodies, aren't there, Phil?
Oh, there's been some crackers this year. Yeah, a really nice picture of Mike Evans this year that we're going to get out. We've got a signed shirt by Shaq Barrett, which is really, really nice. And there's so much stuff, it's untrue. We've sold more tickets this year than we've ever sold for games at Raymond James. So, and hopefully everybody sort of brings us something back from there as well. So yeah, we've got some nice competition prizes this year. Very good.
So thank you for watching. Make sure you sign up. Phil, Gary, and Marianna, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And as ever, we end by saying, "Go Bucs!"
Go on!
Go Bucs!